Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, no matter where in the world you might be. The Highbury squad is back. It's Tuesday night, and I have been looking forward to talking football with this man for a very long time. Here we go. This will be a great show. It's the state of the Arsenal Union. Good evening to the squaddies in chat as well. I know this is going to be more of a replay show, and I'm cool with that. There's football on right now. I don't know. I'm kind of over it, but I'm still into it. Welcome to the show, Elliot Smith, founder, content creator, trailblazer of Arsenal podcasts. I've been looking forward to this moment for a long time, so thanks for joining me tonight.
Yeah, trailblazer. I don't know if that's a Manscaped reference or not, but yeah, I am a trailblazer in that I got Tim and Paul and Clive to talk into a microphone while I interrupt them. So I appreciate you saying that.
I love that. That's perfect. Really good stuff. And, Elliot, I don't know if people know, but I mean, I think, people know you're a super smart guy, but you are a Princeton University graduate and an attorney by trade. How on earth, because our listeners may not know, but I know they listen to your show, but how on earth did you make the transition from that to podcasting and content creation?
Yeah, I mean, once people figured out that those diplomas were fraudulent, like I had to move on to something else. No, I won't get too much into it because it's actually kind of a downer story, but I was a New Yorker. I lived in New York and practiced law in New York briefly, and it was right when 9/11 happened. And I think for a lot of people in New York at that time, it led to some re-examining of priorities. So I quit that life. I decided to be a singer in Nashville, Tennessee, with this small caveat being that I am very bad at music, singing, writing music, all of it really. So then I had to reinvent myself again. I have some other business stuff I do, but the Arsenal came along and I had takes, and I just decided that I had to share those takes, and here we are.
I love it. I love it. So this is a surprise because I didn't think he could make it tonight, and I'm happy he can, maybe just for a few minutes, because he's actually working the Chelsea-Leicester game tonight. And to connect you guys as well, Super Kevin Campbell's popped in the house.
Oh my.
Sophie, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. And
how are you doing, my friend?
Good to meet you, Kevin.
Nice
Surprise.
one.
Yeah.
Nice one. Nice surprise, huh?
Yeah, big fan.
Oh, that's good, man. That's good.
Huge surprise, Kev. I know that you've got a busy night ahead of you, so thanks for joining. I just wanted to start with Elliot here on Arsenal have been through such a transition. And Elliot, Kevin and I talk about how it's not been a great season. It's been the trajectory of Arsenal Football Club in the Premier League has been that downward curve. If we were doing a presentation to business owners and investors and third-party collaborators, it would definitely look that way in the Premier League, despite winning the FA Cups, getting to Europa League final and a semi-final. So I wanted to ask you, do you think Arsenal Football Club are in a better position today than they were when Wenger left and Emery left? So despite the chaos of the Premier League and breaking all the worst records, in terms of having an eye on the future, are we actually in a better position even than when we were under those managers?
No, I would say decidedly not. I mean, we are in a better position to be the first club to ever win the Europa Conference. And I think that could be really exciting for everyone, assuming we actually make it into that. But no, I mean, look, down the line, we can get into the academy players that are breaking through, and there is some exciting youth at the club. And I think that the club has done a good job and deserves credit for revitalizing the academy, for shaking up the academy and starting to churn out some really exciting talent, the likes of which we didn't see very often. But I think from the other standpoint, what we are realizing is Arsene Wenger, for all of the flaws that I may have felt he had towards the end and tactical issues that I think needed to be corrected and probably was time to move on, we have moved on in the very negative sense of really seeing the amount of flaws he was able to conceal by managing so many roles within the organization. And anytime you have instability at the top of an organization, you're going to see that filter down to the outcome, the results of the way that organization is run. And whatever you thought of Ivan Gazidis, with Arsene leaving and Gazeta's taking over, and Sven Mislintat being in charge, and Jason Rosenfels at Stats DNA, and then Raul comes, and Ivan leaves, and Sven leaves, and Jason Rosenfels leaves, and Raul leaves, and Vinay's promoted, and and Edu gets the job, and then Arteta's head coach, but now he's actually manager. I'm rehashing a lot of things we all know, but I think just that constant turnover and recycling of responsibility at the upper echelons of the footballing aspect of the club have been really destabilizing. And it shouldn't surprise anybody as a result that what's happened on the pitch reflects what's happened behind the scenes, in my view.
I've always asked Kev this question, and he can jump in here too. We've worked in jobs, Elliot, and Kev's been part of organizations that maybe things aren't going so well at the top, but still you have to do your job. You have to execute your objectives, your strategy, whatever it is you're hired to do. So I want to throw this at both of you. Despite those challenges, and I guess the best example is Steve Bruce was killed this season. Everyone wanted his head, but somehow, despite his owner, Mike Ashley, despite the apathy, despite all of the stones being thrown his way, he managed to get a team together and fight for Premier League survival. I'm not comparing us to Newcastle. I'm just giving an example of, Kevin, how maybe sometimes what's going on at the top shouldn't always reflect the day-to-day and what happens on the pitch. Are we making excuses because of the apathy from the owners?
100%. 100%. Look, the excuses about what's going on at the top doesn't affect the players. The players are paid to do a job. Now, in whatever industry you're in, if you're going to let things that shouldn't affect your performance, you end up might not being at the job. Mm-hmm. Because at the end of the day, we all know football's a results business. We know that. But we can't make excuses. I always say it's when the players cross the white line. So you could prepare the players as much as you want. If they cannot perform when they cross that white line, you're going to lose football matches. And our season has been horrendous because these players have not been able to fulfill their obligations to the contract and the football club. That's the bottom line. Now, we could spin it around and we could say the changing at the top made a difference. The problem is Arsenal's culture isn't the same. Arsenal's culture was to win. Arsenal's culture now isn't to win. So you can change as many people at the top as you want. If the culture is to win, doesn't matter who comes in. It's about being the best. But Arsenal haven't wanted to be the best for 16, 17 years.
Elliot, what's your take on that? Because in the cup, Kev and I talk a lot about in the show how we're a cup team. Somehow in those one moment kind of playoff American sports style games, we find a will and a way to be able to be focused and have that mental strength versus over 38 games in the Premier League. We seem to discover this mental impotence that isn't going away anytime soon, although has gotten better a little bit despite Arteta's struggles. What's your take on what Kev said and from the top kind of like to the bottom and how things roll out?
Here's what I would say. Really effective operational control, really good long-range planning, really good organizational structure establishes your range of outcomes, right? So you might say that Liverpool's excellent organizational structure over the past few years has created a range of outcomes where at the top, they can win the Champions League and the Premier League. At the bottom, they're a 4th or 5th place team. Our range of outcomes right now are probably 6th to 9th. So I would say that Arteta, unfortunately, this season has produced near the bottom of what I consider our range of outcomes. What we need is a manager who will take us to the top of our range of outcomes. But then we also need the club to elevate what that range looks like through better long-term planning, better infrastructure, better understanding of how to build a winning team on whatever budget KSE determines is how we're going to build our squad. So I don't think it's an excuse for where we are. I think it's an excuse for what our ceiling is. I think, Kevin, you'd probably agree, we're not good enough to have won this league. We're probably not even quite good enough to be 4th place. We'd be right on the brink of that. Arteta clearly delivered a season that is near the bottom of our expectations, but we need the club to raise those expectations entirely. So I think it's a twofold failure in that respect. and whatever manager you want to appoint, the club has to improve for the ceiling of what we can achieve to be raised.
Kev?
Yes.
I think Elliot brings up a really good point, because when you look at the harmony of Manchester City, that all definitely starts with the fact that they have copious amounts of money and, they have this insane luxury, but yet their highest transfer is less than ours. I think Ruben Diaz costs maybe $4 or $5 million less than Pepe. You and I talked last night about this notion that Arsenal Football Club haven't invested, but yet we have. Mm-hmm. And this is where I don't want to sound like I'm defending the Kroenkes, because I'll just get ripped to shreds and to pieces. But the people that they've hired to make those deals, the people that they've given the war chest to in order to build the club, buy players, it feels like they failed the club as much as Kroenke has, right? Mm-hmm. We're in agreement on that, aren't we, Kev?
100%. The recruitment has been our biggest Achilles heel, because nobody can ever turn around and say money hasn't been spent. Money has been spent, but it's how you spend it. You look at Leicester, and we all often bring Leicester up as a team who recruit smart. They've won a Premiership title, and then what do? They get rid of kind of the heartbeat of that team and rejig, rebuy, and then they fill it and they go again. Why can't Arsenal do that? Because the recruitment has been so poor. The recruitment hasn't wanted to be the best. And when you have a club like Arsenal, you can't do it half-hearted. Half-hearted will not work. And a lot of the time, when we lose matches, if you look at our season, a lot of the time we get out-hustled, we get out-muscled by lesser teams. We're okay. Whereas before we used to beat the smaller teams, and then the big teams we'd struggle with. Now we do well against the big teams, or better against the big teams, and we get out-hustled and out-muscled by the smaller teams. Why? Because we haven't got enough players who want to roll the sleeves up and have a right goal. This is our problem. And, when you're playing against a Manchester United, or you're playing against a Man City or Chelsea or whatever, it's easy to get up for it. But when you're playing against Burnley at home, where the onus is on you to push the tempo, we haven't got it. Our players didn't even turn up for a semi-final.
Twice.
So, you could say the manager, and the manager carries the can at the end of the day. Of course he does. But you know what, guys? The bottom line is, when you're a player, you've got to want to cross that line and want to win for the football club. And I've just not seen enough of that desire.
Elliot.
Yeah.
Kevin and I have debated a lot this season about Arteta. And, I've been very critical of him. And then I went through a phase where I really wanted to just turn the key and be supportive and give him the benefit of the doubt, trying to dig through who his team's going to be. He's inherited players, but he's also bought in a number of players himself. With what Kev has said in terms of crossing the white lines, the season, the owners, how much is Arteta culpable for what's happened this season in the Premier League in particular, in your opinion?
I mean, look, he's not culpable for us not winning the Premier League. He's certainly culpable for us being where we are in the table, and for what I think is a preposterous exit from the Europa League. And I think the funny thing is, he's essentially delivered top 4 results since Boxing Day. Well, what that tells you is it was possible to do that. I think what we've seen is the learning curve, the pain of a learning curve of a first-time coach. And a first-time coach who didn't have anyone above him supporting him, saying, hey, you know what? This Saliba guy is important to our future. Let's try to incorporate him since we didn't get him out on loan. Or, hey, let's move Aubameyang center forward. We gave him that big contract. Let's leave him there. Or, we need to start bringing Martinelli back through now that he's fit. Willian didn't work out. We'll take care of that in the summer for you. You get the young guys in there. Someone who could give him some advice that might have helped him escape some of the potholes that we've stepped in over the course of the season. I mean, playing Emil Smith-Rowe as a false 9 in the first leg of a European semifinal for the first time ever is an avoidable error. That's a first-time coach avoidable error. Maybe he was trying too much to be like Pep, who loves to try things in the Champions League to his detriment. But I do think that Arteta has made some simple mistakes that are part of the learning curve. The biggest one in my mind, Sophie, is just, I don't think these players are good enough or versatile enough to constantly change systems. I wish Arteta had come in like a Tuchel or a Klopp or, a Pochettino, I hate to invoke the name, and said, here's my system, here's the football we play. We're going to drill it every day. We're going to drill it at the academy level. We're going to drill it at the first team level. We're going to use it every day, and we're going to get great at it. We may not have the players to be great right now, but you're going to learn to play this system. Because I think we have suffered. Saka's left back one game, right back another game, right forward one game. He's an 8 another game. Now we're playing 2-8s with Partey alone in central midfield. Xhaka slides to left back. And I realize injuries have played a role, but Sophie, for me, if I had to pick one mistake that I wish Arteta could have corrected this season, it's just having a clearer philosophy that he implemented, because towards the tail end of the season, we just lost that fluency, that coherence. The players, to me, didn't look like they really understood their roles as clearly as they should have.
Yeah, I think that's a really fantastic point. And there's something that I've mentioned to Kev a lot, is the sense that he's sometimes too smart for his own good. He's cut from that Pep cloth.
Yeah.
But I think what he realized, and maybe too late, and Kevin said it as well in a game where he was there on the sidelines, where I can't remember if it was the Brighton game or which game, Kev, but
Brighton away.
He realized what he has and the quality of player that he has, and that was the day that he lost trust in a few of the players, and being able to kind of rebuild that momentum and later on in the season try to figure out who your best 11 is. I know it's not been particularly easy for him, but he's made some huge faux pas, Kev. Technically,
he's made mistakes, of course he has.
Yeah. But and mistakes that I think I will forgive the league, because I think we've got so far to go in the league to be consistent. But I can't forgive the mistakes he made in the Europa League semi-final, because I think we should be in that final against Manchester United. I think that was his biggest faux pas of the season.
Look, so I agree with the false 9. In training, it probably worked fine. But when you're playing against different opposition, they set up differently, and you don't know what's going through their head, how they're going to affect your weaknesses. We saw Foyth absolutely exploit Ceballos in midfield. But here's the crazy thing. When you get to the home leg, come on, you've got to. The manager could only do so much. The team that crossed that line has to perform, and we let Villarreal off cheap. We let them go. We let them leave the Emirates easy. No blood on the pitch. No sweat. No tears. Celebrating, and we came off with a whimper.
Yeah,
that's the bottom line for me.
No, it's so true. And Elliot, I wanted to get your take, because it really bugged me that we lost not only the semi-final, but that we lost it to Unai Emery, and that we lost it to an average club. And I was talking, I think it was Amanda that said, it doesn't bother me that we lost to Unai Emery, we still lost. And I said, how can it not bother you that, and it should bother him that he lost to the guy he replaced? Is that a factor, or is it just part of the narrative that becomes irrelevant?
Factor.
Yeah,
it's a narrative factor. Look, I mean, ultimately, I'm not so naive to think that matters, but it matters to me. Right? I mean, one of the things we get to do as fans is say what we care about. I care about the captain armband, or I don't, or I care about St. Totteringham's Day, or I don't. These things only matter if we say they do, right? The only thing that makes any of football matter is that the fans care about it. I wanted to beat our former manager. I didn't think much of Unai Emery. I didn't particularly care for him, and I would have liked to have beaten him. Not because I think he's a bad guy, by the way. It's not vindictiveness. I just think I'd like to think that we have a coach now who tactically could outmaneuver Unai Emery. And unfortunately, I don't think that happened. And I think Kevin makes a great point that the players in the second leg in particular, Arteta very pointedly, I think it was after the West Brom game, said, or maybe it was after the Chelsea game, that my players have given 120% this season, and you see that in every game. I think what frustrated a lot of fans is that second leg against Villarreal was very tame. And whether that's on the fans or the manager, or not the fans, the players or the manager, or a combination of both, is anyone's ability to speculate on. But the manner of the defeat in the second leg was really disappointing. And look, if that had been a rocking Emirates Stadium and the fans had been there right behind the players, we might have seen something different. I acknowledge that it's hard for a coach to lift the players without the atmosphere, but that's the job right now, and it didn't happen. So people are going to assign blame where they prefer. But yeah, it mattered to me with Emery. I would have liked to have beaten him, and I'm obviously quite disappointed we didn't.
Yeah, I know Kev feels the same too. So, what I find interesting is this. We did a show that was based in reality last week, Elliot, and we discussed how the Kroenkes are not going anywhere. Mikel Arteta is here to stay for the immediate future, and as is Edu. Now, I respect fans wanting to protest and they want the owners out, and I totally get that. They have every right to protest. But when you kind of look at what we've just talked about in terms of money spent, the fact that we have been given investment into the team, people have handled it badly, terrible contracts, giving players away. I wanted to show you guys this chart real quick. Since January 2018, the players that have left for nothing, and look at the players as well, and that we've continued to kind of do bad business in this sense, and lose money, and now have to maybe rely on selling players like Maitland-Niles and Willock to make up those funds, maybe letting Bellerin go, all of those things. Do you trust that they are the right team to take us through this, as Kev says, the most important summer maybe in Arsenal's history? Do you trust that Arteta and Edu can make this happen, maybe despite the challenges above them?
Look, they got us Willian last summer, and they got Ryan Bertrand lined up now. What's not to trust, Sophie? No, I mean, it's hard, right? It is hard to trust. And part of the reason I struggle with the trust is because I think you have to have a philosophy that is built on long-term success. That's what you're building for. And I feel like this club has, for the last several windows and several seasons, tried to put sticking plasters on the problems and solve for the short term. And so we wind up losing Ramsey for free because we keep him till his contract runs out, or we wind up bringing in Willian as a short-term fix, which guess what? It doesn't fix anything. Ryan Bertrand to me feels a lot like that process continuing. I think we've shown a lack of decisiveness when it comes to selling. It's painful to sell your players sometimes, but you sell them to renew the squad. And I think we've shown a lack of vision in terms of identifying targets that are maybe just outside of the obvious choices. We've either bought at the top of the market, Pepe and Partey, or we've taken old players that everybody knows on a free and put them on a contract. But if you look at the real successes, it's when we've been more creative in our solutions. Look how good Kieran Tierney has been, admittedly, injury issues notwithstanding. The jackpot we hit with a Martinelli, the extent to which we've found some solutions that are actually really encouraging when we haven't just done the really obvious thing at the top of the market or, the experienced Premier League retiree. So I don't really trust. I would say this. You're always going to be wrong if you characterize something as being 100%. We haven't gotten it 100% wrong, but our hit rate isn't high enough. And when you look at Leicester, when you look at Liverpool and their plan, sell as they're aging out of their prime, buy as they're entering their prime, buy low, sell high. It sounds so obvious. Mm-hmm. We just need to sharpen up. And I think the challenge is the market's getting harder. The market's getting more sophisticated. The number of clubs that are wising up and using their resources better is increasing. And we've got a pretty junior guy in Edu, and a very junior guy in Mikel, and a very junior guy in Vinay, who's not a football guy, trying to compete in that marketplace. And with all due respect to them, why would you expect them to know? They're just learning. So it is really concerning to me right now. And, one last point. Sorry, I know I'm going on, but the KSE thing, you hit the nail on the head, Sophie. It is not about having the money to spend. We've spent the money. But if I give $1,000 to my 6-year-old and she spends it all on candy, that's my fault, not hers. Right? KSE's problem isn't the money. It's the lack of oversight. It's the unwillingness to get in there, understand what's happening day to day and say, this guy's not up to the task, or these people aren't the best in the industry. I need to remove them and replace them with people who really know what they're doing. The lack of oversight at the top is, in my view, the biggest challenge with KSE, the absenteeism, not the lack of investment.
Yeah.
But he's done that, hasn't he? He's done that. Look at the people who's been at the club in that position. from Gazidis to, Mislintat and all these guys, Raul Sanelli, all these guys have been in, come and gone. So you've got to put people in charge of it who you believe have the track record for it.
Yes.
And these guys have the track record. But when it comes to Arsenal, it's gone pear-shaped. Why?
Well, does Edu have the track record? I mean, does Mikel? I mean,
I'm talking about you've mentioned Edu, and you've mentioned Mikel being novices. But what I'm saying is, previously to them, we've had people in who have had the track record and have still got it wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I think where we would debate is I felt Raul was a scary appointment. I think Barcelona fans will tell you what you need to know about Raul. And I think we saw with his relationship with Kia that we became a really cozy place for a lot of people to profit, but not for the club to succeed. And I think Sven and Jason Rosenfeld, guys like that who had a more maybe modern and progressive approach to doing this, were driven out in a power struggle with Raul, which he won. And why did he win it? Because KSE wasn't on top of it. They send in this guy, this attorney, to look at what's going on behind the scenes, and 2 weeks later, Raul's sacked, right? So if they had just been aware of what was going on in their own club, I think they might have been able to get to the right solution quicker.
Yeah, but Elliot, sorry, Soph, I just want to say
go on,
before I have to shoot off.
Yeah.
For me, this isn't just recent. This has gone on for 15 years.
Yeah, it's true.
We've spent money. We have. So when you talk about we go along and then it gets to the end of the Wenger era, the squad that Unai Emery is supposed to be inheriting should be a lot stronger. The squad that Mikel Arteta inherits from Unai Emery should be stronger still because he brought players in. But here we are, 5 years, no Champions League qualification. We're at a real crossroads now. We've got an owner that nobody wants, but yet we want him to write the big checks. You can't write this stuff. You can't write it.
I agree with you, Kevin.
Yeah. Kev, I know you've got to go because you've got to do some work for Sky Sports. So thanks so much for
joining. It's not Sky Sports tonight, Astro. I'm on Astro
yes,
tonight.
You're on Astro tonight.
Astro,
I know kickoff is coming up. So thanks so much for jumping in and joining us. I loved connecting
problem.
you and
I didn't want to
Elliot
leave a message for you, Elliot. I wanted to speak to you straight away. Look after yourself.
I hope you'll come on our show someday, Kevin. It's great to talk to you.
No problem. Look after yourself. Bye, squaddies. See you later. Soph, take care, darling. Bye.
See you, Captain Kev. I'll see you tomorrow. Take care. Always good stuff with Kev.
Great,
and happy that he was able to join in. I just want to pick up on, is it a sense of the owners were blinded by the Raul Barcelona lights? Because I know Sven made some mistakes too, Elliot. I mean, there was a couple of dogs that, but every technical director of football, sporting director, call it what you want, give them the job title. There's always hits and misses. Every transfer is a risk, right? You could argue that Willian was a calculated risk, had been with Chelsea for a long time. I think the biggest mistake was the money that we gave him and the length of which that we did that. But now Ryan Bertrand is going to be judged on a Willian. And I don't think that's entirely fair. So if I can just rewind for a second,
sure.
Were the owners blinded by Raul? Was he just a really good salesman? Could he sell ice to an Eskimo?
Yeah, I think there's some of that. I mean, I think that they just, in the most superficial sense, saw a guy who was in charge of the football business at one of the biggest clubs in the world and didn't really look at his track record there and assumed that he was the right guy and he had a lot of good contacts and that he'd get it sorted out. Maybe they were caught a little cold by Gazidis leaving, and didn't have a succession plan in place. I think it's always good to look when you have a dysfunctional organization, look at what the people do when they leave that organization. Gazidis, who I was not a fan of, candidly, has gone on to Milan and they've done a pretty darn good job implementing some pretty progressive squad building concepts, and they're building something that looks pretty reasonable there. Sven Mislintat has gone on to Stuttgart and got them promoted in one season, a fledgling new coach that he's mentoring. They brought in a bunch of players super cheap and they're halfway up the Bundesliga, on a shoestring budget. So if you look at the way these people have performed when they've left our organization, I think it tells you something about the dysfunction in which they're trying to operate here. They say fish rots from the head, Sophie. And I think it is interesting, right? I don't want the owners. I shouldn't say I don't want. I'd be fine with the owners putting in £10 billion every year and we win the league like City. But what I'd like from ownership is simply for them to be engaged in the day-to-day operations of the club enough to know whether they have the right people or wrong people in charge, to be surrounded by the best people. If Arsenal has anything going for it, as one of the biggest football brands in the world, in London, beautiful stadium, great facilities, a great history, you should be able to attract people who are really excited about Project Arsenal. It may not be easy to attract the star players right now, but you know who would be easy to attract? The star director of football or the star technical director, right? Because what an exciting project. And it just makes me kind of sad that we're trying to rebuild this great club with three guys in Vinay, Edu, and Mikel who are just learning. They're just learning, and that feels unfair to them, you know?
Yeah, I totally hear you. And, you know, for me, I always say Arsenal Football Club may be an absolutely shite Premier League team right now and lack competitiveness and any courage in any way to really put themselves out there week after week. But Arsenal Football Club has massive brand equity. It has pedigree, and it should be an attraction to. And look, why would Brendan Rodgers leave Leicester right now? Why would he? As a great owner, he's going to have more money to spend this summer. He's just won the FA Cup. It looks like he's going to be in Europe again, you know, next season. But the point is if it's not a Brendan Rodgers, I still believe there is a name out there, Elliot, that will take the job because they know that the only way is up, you know, for Arsenal. So right now, though, the only way is up for Arteta. Okay, because he's the manager. We can't be looking at in November and December. We might be looking at options for a new manager if we're still in the same position in the Premier League. Do you trust him, though? Forget the transfers and the business side that we've talked about. What happens on the pitch is so important because it can combat all of that. You know, we've seen in regular life how, you know, a Ted Lasso. That show's a hit for a reason. People love it because you're overcoming adversity despite the challenges ahead of you. So do you trust him to take Arsenal 2.0 into the future, like with Saka, with ESR, with a Balogun, with an Aziz, and then with the imports like a Martinelli, with a signing like Tierney? Do you trust him in that this summer he can truly build a team in his image? Every coach, I say this a lot on the show, has a team that is in their image, their personality, their character. You know, we saw Conte do that at Juventus, Chelsea, at Inter Milan. Now Pep has done it at Barca, Bayern, Manchester City, and Simeone's done it at Atletico Madrid. You could argue that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is starting to do that a little bit. United, as bad as they seem that they've been, they're still second, and they're going to have European football, and they're in a European final. Do you trust him with that part of everything?
So, I mean, it's tough, right? Because right now, no one's going to like to hear this, but no, I don't. I really don't. And that's not because I don't think he knows the X's and O's, the tactical side of football. I think it's pretty clear he knows the tactical side of football. I think some of the tactical innovations he's tried this season, some of the solutions he's come up with, even though I'm frustrated that he's been kind of a tinker man at times this season, they're interesting. And I wouldn't deny that he knows the tactics side. But what I think I've had to learn this season watching him is how much more there is to football management, managing the egos, managing the dressing room, getting the most out of your players. You know, the Ted Lasso part of it's relevant because was calling out Aubameyang for being late in the North London derby the right approach? I don't know. That felt like a guy wanting to put his stamp of authority on a team. And I think all along the way, Arteta has chosen the hammer. You know, they say to a man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. I think the way he's dealt with everything from Guendouzi to Aubameyang to Saliba to just some of the squad issues generally have looked like someone who's very one note in his approach. And so I think he still has to learn how to manage the egos, how to manage the dressing room. To be fair, he had a bit of that reputation as a player, as a very sort of stern player in the dressing room. So that part of it, I don't know. Can he manage the challenging environment and dynamic of a dressing room at football and get the most out of those players? Now, they don't seem to be revolting against him. You don't see a lot of that, so maybe there's a future. What I would say is, if you want my pitch for why there's hope, Sophie, maybe we are now at the tail end of the growing pains. Maybe now what we see when we look at the post-Boxing Day data and we see that actually we've had top 4 results and some of it's getting better, maybe we're exiting the period of him learning and getting a lot of things wrong, and by next season we'll be entering the period where he really starts to come into his own. We've invested these sort of 1.5 seasons into his learning curve. My case for hope would be that now he's moving into the period where he's more at ease, more understands what he wants to do. That, though, feels like a manufactured cause for hope a little bit more than the reality, Sophie. I don't know. I mean, you can tell I'm sort of searching for answers. So many of us.
I tell you, because it's very confusing, because when you see us play away to Leicester and put in that type of performance, and then we're so inconsistent to be able to do that. I'm not saying we have to do that game after game, Elliot, because every opponent is different. You set up differently, strategically, tactically. You have a squad to make choices. You've got Europe. You've got 2 domestic cup competitions, as well as the Premier League as well. But when you see us play like that Arsenal, when you see us go away to Manchester United and be dominant, some people say we got lucky, but I think any other manager who puts on a performance like that gets credit for it. You could argue Chelsea away, very sensible. We went there without any desire or dream to play sexy football. We just wanted to get a result. And he was able to do that. Why has there been this inconsistency and this tinkering a la Claudio Ranieri style, but on another level? Like, I don't understand that part.
So let's be fair to him in one respect, which is he's got 2 big issues. He's handed a really imbalanced squad, right? Like if you said, where's all the talent at Arsenal? It's in the front 3, right? He's got 2 strikers. He's got 5 wingers. He brings in Willian. Okay, there's really no explanation for that. But then he's got, with Partey comes in, he's got 1 elite midfielder probably, depending on where you are on Xhaka. I wouldn't put him in that group. He's got 5 center backs, but none of whom have totally elevated themselves. He has 1 good fullback. So I do kind of get that he probably tinkered in part because he couldn't figure out how to, at first, get the right talent on the pitch. The second thing is injuries have hurt him. I mean, losing Tierney, I think, short-circuited his brain. The decision to go to Xhaka at left back worked in 1 game. Was it Sheffield United maybe? But Everton's just shifted Richarlison over to Xhaka's wing, and we saw what happened there, and then he tried it again against Villarreal. I think some of the tinkering has been a combination of injuries and imbalance in the squad. I mean, it doesn't help when you go into the first leg of a European semifinal and neither Aubameyang nor Lacazette are available. Okay, I wouldn't have picked Smith Rowe at false 9 regardless, just put Martinelli there, put Pepe there, but it wasn't like he had an obvious choice. And so I think when you take the obvious choices away from him, Sophie, he's someone who tries to magic up a solution. He makes it calculus when sometimes it needs to be arithmetic. I think that is, I've said that before in our podcast. I think that's a tendency he needs to move away from.
Yeah. Is that an arrogance and maybe being under Pep Guardiola, but not understanding that you don't have the talent pool that Pep does? I understand playing Xhaka at left back against Sheffield United, but then to double down again against Everton and then to triple down again.
Villarreal, yeah.
So the short circuit, sometimes you learn from that instantly. The Everton game would be the moment to realize, you know what? I think we're better off with Saka in that position. Xhaka with Partey has been the best combination in midfield. We can make adjustments. That's the part for me that makes me afraid of him even going into next season. That I get the short circuit, but he has other examples whereby he can rectify those short circuit moments. And
this is where having someone above him would help, right, Sophie? Like, just make your decisions make sense. You decided to give Aubameyang the richest contract in club history, or second to Ozil, depending what what the information is, this summer. So start him at center forward. Don't play him on the wing with Lacazette up front. Lacazette's got 1 more year at the club. Play Aubameyang center forward, right? You spent £72 million on Pepe. I mean, he didn't, but we did. Don't bring in Willian right after Pepe started to blossom on his way to the FA Cup. Start him on the right and start Saka on the left, or whatever the case may be. I think a lot of times someone just tapping you on the shoulder and pointing out the obvious, pointing out the simple solution, showing you the path can be helpful. He brought in a lot of assistants, Sophie, who are very young. He didn't bring in an assistant coach who has the experience, who had a more senior voice. Everything he's done at the club, from consolidating power and being manager to some of the personality clashes he's had and players he's decided to ostracize from the group to some of the decision-making he's done on the personnel side reflect someone who wanted to consolidate authority and show his skill. And when you're new, I think you need to be able to admit what you don't know. So on the arrogance front, I hate to call it arrogance because that's such an aggressive loaded word, but I do think it's a stubbornness. And I tend to agree with you that unless he solves that and is willing to have some voices that will be able to give him a viewpoint other than his own, he's in trouble.
Do you think that he saw a little bit of that in Wenger? Because there's this, I agree, stubbornness over arrogance. That's a better way of putting it. But do you also think that there's a megalomaniac part? And maybe in order to be
you downgraded
a manager
from arrogance to stubbornness, and then back up to megalomaniac.
But hold on, hear me out on this one, right? Because Wenger was a megalomaniac. There's no, in my opinion. Now, maybe that's harsh, and you can, with our lexicon here between the two of us, you can downgrade me on that one too a little bit, maybe. But that was the argument with him was that he was reluctant to bring certain players in to do certain things. He chose particular ex-players to come in, and whether they were part of the academy, whether they were part of his, first team coaching staff. He did learn from Wenger. Wenger is one of his mentors. And I completely agree with you. In a case of maybe being a little afraid of being the novice in the YTS, see in corporate life all the time, the younger person gets the job. There's more senior statesmen beside them. If you screw up, the senior statesman is ready to come in and take over. Am I talking out my ass here, or do you see a case for that?
No, I mean, look, first, I think megalomaniac is certainly a word you can throw out there. I don't think you're wrong per se. I mean, some people would say that Arsene Wenger was at his best when Dean was there, right? And he had someone who would kind of say, I'll take care of this one, or hey, maybe we can look at it this way. And that when Dean left, he didn't have that person whose voice he necessarily respected as much and he would listen to. The problem with calling him a megalomaniac is I think what we've seen since he left is there was a huge power vacuum at the club and no one to solve any problems. And so I think he just soaked up all the jobs and responsibility in the absence of anyone else doing it. Mm-hmm. And so he became a bit of a control freak. And you could say that's a personality flaw, or you could say it's a structural flaw. What's bananas to me is that we hired a first-time coach. So Wenger goes. Gazidis comes in. We hire Emery and very, very pointedly call him first-team coach, right? Mm-hmm. We're implementing the continental model, the director of football model. And here we are 3 seasons later, and a first-time coach is now manager, and we've sort of torn that model up a little bit. So, yeah, I think he has a little of that, but I think we've certainly contributed to it. I wonder about information bubbles, what it's like in COVID, not having fans giving you that feedback. What do you have survived?
What do you mean by information bubbles? Like the media or internally?
Well, right? let's be clear. I'm not saying it's nice to get booed by your own fans, but fans in the stands are a pretty good way to get feedback on how you're doing. And you wonder if the club are so much behind Arteta that he hasn't really been woken up to the idea that this isn't good enough. This is not good enough. And, when the fans are in the stadium, there's no way to avoid knowing where you stand and whether it's good. And some people may disagree with that, but I wonder when you've got young assistant coaches and Edu, who seems to be very willing to take a back seat, and Vinay, who's not a football guy and very young, and the owners aren't involved on a day-to-day basis, and there's no fans booing when you're sitting ninth, in March. What amount of negative feedback, and I mean, the good kind of negative feedback, right? Critical feedback is filtering through to him. What message is getting through to him about things he needs to change? You look at some of his responses, Sophie, in the latest interviews, and you can tell that there's some stress there.
Yes.
Right? But I wonder if enough positive negative feedback, if you know what I mean, constructive, that's what I mean. Constructive criticism is filtering through to him.
I think my biggest concern is his relationship with Aubameyang. I think everyone else, it seems to be since the North London derby, that's definitely the relationship that has been maybe fractured the most. But I think if there's going to be a shocker this summer, it would be the exit of Aubameyang, but he's not going anywhere. He's on a great amount of money, and we lost the opportunity to sell him last summer. Yes. So they've got to figure that part out. So we've got another 15 minutes here with Elliot. Get some of your questions in. I'll fire them off to him real quick. But I want to ask one last one here. This is the state of the Arsenal Union with Elliot. who is a content creator, host, founder of Arsenal Vision podcast, one of the best in the business. And so happy to have him on the show tonight.
Entirely hyperbolic, but thank you.
Truth serum.
Thank you, Sophie.
As an American, does it bother you that the Kroenkes, some people can't see beyond him being an American? You know, we've seen all of the vitriol really in that European Super League go towards the Liverpool owners, the Arsenal owners, versus anybody else. Does it bother you that that's been a little bit of the narrative?
No, I mean, sometimes I think we can get too mad at stuff we can't control. Mm-hmm. It is natural that when, a foreign person comes in, takes control of a community entity, takes it away from the community in a way that people feel really upset about, and then wants to totally disrupt the relationship to the fabric of the game and the history and the culture of the game. Like, some of it's going to spill over. I mean, look, Stan Kroenke's problem isn't that he's an American. Stan Kroenke's problem is his view of how sport should be, his lack of ambition to win trophies, his lack of day-to-day oversight into his club. We can go on and on. If people want to make the association with being American, I'm not going to be so precious as to take it personally. Like, I think I've been so lucky to be able to be part of a show where I speak to an Irishman and two Englishmen about, and an Irishman who lives in America, about Arsenal Football Club, and people from England are willing to listen, and Australia and India and the United States. Like, people are open and accepting and loving when they feel that your heart's in the right place and you add value. I think that it was always natural that the fact that this model felt like a very American franchise sports model was going to lead to it being branded an American idea. And ultimately, do I believe that people really just hate Americans and hate Stan because he's American? I don't. But I understand how things work. It's guilt by association, and so be it. Like, there are plenty of American fans, by the way, that don't like Stan Kroenke, don't.
Oh, yeah.
And not only Arsenal fans, right? Ask St. Louis, people in St. Louis what they think of the guy, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, Sophie, I hope people don't paint with a broad brush and think, all Americans don't know anything about football. Look, do I get the occasional stick to baseball? Sure. The problem with that is I don't know anything about baseball, so it wouldn't help me, But no, I get it. I understand why it happens. I just hope that we can appreciate that. Look, you mentioned Mike Ashley. He's not American. Last I checked, he's not a good owner either. Being connected to the community isn't a guarantee that you're going to have the best interest of the club at heart.
Right, exactly. Okay, let's get to some questions for you before we get you out of here. An interesting one from Nishant. Elliot, if you could make one structural change at the club this summer, what would you change?
For me, that would be replacing Edu with someone really experienced and good at what they do. A Zorc type person from Dortmund, a Ragnick, someone with a track record for real value-based, analytics-driven recruitment and reinvestment. I mean, if you look at what Leicester have done, when we bought Socrates and lost him for free, they bought Sun Yun-Chu. When we brought in, they brought in Justin, I think James Justin, right? And we've tried Lichtsteiner and Cedric, guys that are worth nothing. Justin now a year later is worth 25 million, right? So people that understand the very basic principles of recruitment, who understand the way to find targets that aren't the obvious ones, because as much as I think changing Arteta can improve our short-term results, but they might improve them from 9th to 6th or 5th. Right. But if we want to challenge for titles and win Champions League, which, oh, by the way, should be the goal, we can do it. Someone has to be in charge who isn't just trying to fix 2021, but who's trying to fix 2025. Because we're not winning the Champions League next season. Let's build for that. Let's build for a Premier League title 5 seasons from now.
Totally agree. And I don't kill me for this comparison, but it's a little bit like when Pochettino took over at Spurs. They had a plan and a project, and there was a vision, and that kind of, they still got to a Champions League final. Unfortunately, they did not invest around Son and Kane, and now they're in this situation. But that's the point, is having a vision, knowing where you're going. Because Pramod asks a really interesting question for you, Elliot, is Arteta playing mechanical possession football when most of our players are suited for counter-attacking football? Again, square pegs, round holes, maybe, not being able to have that more experience and vision.
It's a really fascinating question. I just saw Mike in the comments, saying that I probably hurt your ears with how I pronounce Socrates. So can you just
no? He's also asking about your internet and why it's suddenly working amazingly.
It's got to be you, Sophie. It's your magic. So how do I say that name so I don't get it wrong in the future?
Socrates Papastadopoulos.
Got it. Check. Yeah, I mean, so the question about what the players are suited to, it's a really fair one. I'm not going to pretend to be so good at, sort of talent identification and tactical awareness as to say this is the system that suits them the most. What I would say is that he's got to pick one. I mean, watching Saka play 4 positions in 4 games drives me nuts, right? Watching 3 different guys play center forward. This idea of horses for courses sounds fun, but none of the good clubs really do it. It's one thing if you're Manchester City and be like, I'll take Raheem Sterling out and put in, Riyad Mahrez, but we're not that. So no, don't do that. Just pick a system and go with it.
Right.
Papadopoulos.
Socrates. And of course, don't forget Dinos Mavropanos, ladies and gentlemen.
Hey,
we have another Greek.
We have all the center backs. All of them.
We do. Here's one from GB, who's a regular listener. Am I wrong with the Saliba relationship being badly damaged, or the American thing we've done right now, but I want to focus on the Saliba part of this question, because even in his press conference today, he wasn't committed to him. It was a non-committal response. Am I overthinking that one, Elliot?
I got to be really careful, because I could go an hour on this and do a rant and this is where I do get really frustrated. And I'm not even frustrated, Mikel. This is the club's fault. This is why you have to have someone above the coach. We spent $30 million on a teenage center back. When you do that, you are saying as a club, we believe we're getting him before he blows up. He's really highly regarded. He's part of our future. We have to have a plan. Plan is year 1, he's going to stay in France. What's plan year 2? Year 2 is he comes back and he starts to be integrated in the first team. Year 3, he's our starter and he's a star. And by year 7, we're selling him for 80 million pounds. You have to have a plan when you spend 30 million on a teenager. Now, look, we plan and God laughs, or whatever the expression is. I get it. But the idea that this guy comes back after a year of us knowing what was going on, we can't sort out a loan for him before the deadline. Now he's stuck with us. But we can't find a minute for him to play, and we're going to use Mustafi instead, who we're desperate to get rid of. And then we're going to damage the relationship with the player, and we're going to create a situation where this 30 million pound teenager now has a murky future with the club. That is a classic example of asset destruction, value destruction. And we do that constantly, value destruction. We did it with Guendouzi. A lot of that may be Guendouzi's fault. Fine. But you can pick an example. They're all over the place. United got pelters for what they paid for Martial. They got their money's worth out of Anthony Martial, and they probably could sell him for a profit after all these years. We just broke what would have been our transfer record a few seasons ago on Saliba. He's never played a minute for the club. It's unclear whether he will, and we let him rot in the reserves because we couldn't get a loan sorted. That, to me, is a combination of Arteta making some big mistakes, but no one at the club above Arteta being able to guide us to the right solution. And in a well-run club, I feel that someone would have helped Arteta, guided, had a plan for that player, and we just did not. We had nothing.
Yeah, I tend to agree, because I know a lot of the times when there have been folks on our show, they talk about the personal struggles that he's had. And of course, losing someone who's probably the most significant person in your life is not easy. And I say this with so much respect that I also feel like that's not the reason why he's not at Arsenal. That's not the reason why he was sent to France. And you're right in terms of asset destruction. Torreira now, what's the sell-on value for Torreira? No. Dinos Mavropanos has actually done really well at Stuttgart, so that's okay. But Maitland-Niles' value could have sold him for 22 million to Wolves last season. And here we are now where I think he's devalued in the marketplace because he's had a horrendous time.
How about Reece Nelson? What was the plan with Reece Nelson? What
is the plan with someone like Reece?
Yeah.
So, and Willock has been a shining star in the sense of a great example of what a loan deal can do for the player, for the current club. for the potential club that he's going to go to. His market value is up. So as we're looking to start this season, Elliot, I want to get you out on this one.
Okay.
We've got some big decisions to make, and we've got to raise money in order to be able to do some business. But at the January for me was a good transfer window because you got rid of the click. Did it improve us? Maybe in spurts. If you look at the form table from December, I always say to people the league actually starts in August, not December.
Oh, that's crazy thinking, Sophie.
Is it? I've heard.
or is it just actually a fact? It could be,
actually a fact. Might be. I'll let you decide on that one. Mm-hmm. Maitland-Niles, Reece, Willock, Guendouzi, Torreira, Mavropanos. Is Balogun going to get a chance next season? Is he going to go out on loan? Does Aziz kind of move into that first team groove a little bit more? How do you see us looking when it comes to that first game in August? Because my biggest concern is he's still going to tinker to try and find his team as the season starts versus knowing who you want to be from kickoff.
I have no sense of it at all. There's a Euros, which complicates the transfer window. It's unclear what the budget is. Just please be decisive. I know it's painful to lose a Joe Willock because he's an academy kid and you see him scoring goals, and it's painful to lose a Maitland-Niles because, athleticism-wise and profile-wise, he seems like someone who can help us. Being indecisive will never work. Look at Eddie Nketiah. Arteta loved Eddie Nketiah, so he can't go out anywhere. We can't loan him out. I love Eddie Nketiah. And what winds up happening? He wasn't good enough. And what have we done with him? We've tanked his value because he's sat on the bench, not playing at all. Reece Nelson, okay, maybe he turned down a loan. Point is, we tanked his value because we weren't decisive. It's painful to move guys on. I know people that didn't want to sell Alex Iwobi. He's a good player. He's an academy kid. Why do we want to move him on? Loved Alex Iwobi, the guy. What we got for him was highway robbery. We need more of that. We need to be decisive. And you know what? If we get it wrong once in a while and we go, wow, we regret that one, we'll have all this money we got from selling these guys to maybe get it right the next time. So, Sophie, I don't know what it'll look like, but it's got to be decisive. And if it's a summer of more plasters like Ryan Bertrand to fill the gap at backup left back, okay, does it hurt us? No. Does it make us a better squad that you say this is a project that takes us up the table and up in Europe? And it clearly doesn't. Let's go out and be decisive and long-term in our thinking, because we're not going to win the league next season, but let's try to win it sometime. That would be nice. That's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, and to me now, to have teams like Wolves and Villa and Southampton and, they'll be our main, that's who we're kind of grafting against in the league, isn't it? Yeah. These are the kinds of teams that we're up against right now. And I hear what you're saying about Bertrand. I also feel like sometimes we're really snobby as Arsenal fans in terms of taking a player like that who can step in and do a decent job because he has Premier League experience versus novices, and people that don't know the league. And Kieran Tierney is injury prone, and quite a few people actually have thrown that question at you in chat as well with Kieran Tierney. I hope, my goodness, we all pray that he can stay fit for an entire season. We haven't seen that yet. So is it such a bad deal to have a Bertrand versus someone who's going to be more ambitious and want to, you know what I mean? Bertrand might know his place in the squad.
So look, I want to be clear. It's not about snobbery. For me, it's about saying 3 seasons from now, are we going to look back and say bringing in Ryan Bertrand for those 2 seasons helped us on our upward trajectory? I struggle to see it. I think it's a player we've had our eye on for a couple of seasons. Now he's cheap and available. But here's something interesting, Sophie. Look, not everybody likes data, but if you look at the data alone, he's in the bottom 50% of basically every statistical metric for a fullback in the league. He had a bad season, and he's going to be 32 next season. Haven't we gambled enough on stopgap solutions who are aging out of their prime? I would just say, find a £3 million 19-year-old who maybe, if he's got to play the 6 games when Tierney's injured, turns into something. Instead of the Cedric, get the James Justin. Instead of the Socrates, get the Sonyonji. You know what I mean? I think it shows a lack of imagination in problem solving to me that I think is all too familiar with how we've done it. It's a round peg. It's a round hole. He's an experienced left back to back up Tierney. I don't dispute that. And I'm not saying that's the move that's going to crater the club. It's just not taking us anywhere. And it's so familiar in that respect.
I totally hear what you're saying on that front. And from that angle, absolutely. It doesn't show ambition. It shows, in some regards, you could say it's fear, right? Because it's like an insurance policy versus going out there and, gambling a little bit more, taking a risk on another player. So I always lie when I say I'm going to get you out on this because it's known as Sophie time. So here we go real quick. I know you're a very busy guy. I want to get your take on, are you cool with letting Bellerin, Xhaka go, Leno? What's your take on the 7 supposed players that want out of the club? Is it a case of don't let the door hit you on the way out, or we can't cut our noses off to spite our face and have too many drastic changes when things are unstable as they are right now?
Sophie, the reality is you can't move 13 players out of the club in a window. You just can't, because no matter how much I'd like to think long-term, you have to field a team next season, right? I would sell Hector Bellerin, sure. I would sell Granit Xhaka for sure, because again, people, what I think is a small challenge we have? We want decisions to be obvious. And this is true in life. It's very rare that life says this job opportunity is so obvious, take it, or buy that car, or move into that home. You have to take a little bit of a leap of faith. By the time it's obvious we should get rid of a player, no one wants to pay you for him. By the time it's obvious we should buy a player, he's 100 million, right? So we have, when you look at Liverpool buying Mohamed Salah or Sadio Mane, you have to be willing to take that little leap of faith on a guy's potential, like we did with Tierney, or you have to be willing to sell at a time when there's still value. Xhaka can still bring us money. Bellerin can still bring us money. So go get that money and reinvest. I'm absolutely happy to do it. Leno's a slightly different one, only because I don't see goalkeeper as remotely the biggest problem at the club right now. And the one thing that scares me with goalkeepers is you never know exactly what you're getting. The data is still very new for goalkeepers, so that doesn't really work. You look at what happened with Kepa Arrizabalaga at Chelsea, right? And you just never know. You could be surprised. So Leno's good enough that I wouldn't necessarily try to solve keeper this summer. But if they love Raya and they want to bring him in and move on Leno, then so be it. It wouldn't bother me. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you, this has been a brilliant hour and 2 minutes. I would love to do a part 2 with you once the season is over.
Yeah.
And, the summer transfer market kicks in because the State of the Union is fragile and it can only go up from here. I would say that, just the silver linings, seeing Harry Kane want to leave Tottenham and knowing that they don't have a Saka, ESR, a Martinelli, a Tierney, and, some of those real exciting players coming through has given me a little smile. But I don't like to throw stones at glass houses either, Elliot,
You do wonder how they're going to replace all the no trophies he won.
Yeah, completely. Well, listen, you've been absolutely gold, and thank you so much for joining me this evening.
It was awesome. Thank you.
And really appreciate you coming on the show. The show returns tomorrow. We will be back with the post-game show after Crystal Palace. Don't forget to go visit our friends at footballprizes.co.uk for the latest Arsenal auction. I will reveal more of that tomorrow, and a free ticket giveaway, of course, on Thursday. In the meantime, we hope you've enjoyed the show. Thanks again to Elliot for coming on. And until then, it's always Arsenal.